Irvine just got way too wasted and like put me in a what do you call it when you put your
headlock.
A headlock. Put me in a headlock. It was dragging me down the hall, and then I kept like stomping on his feet to have him let go. Finally, he let go, panting, and fell against the wall and slid on the floor. And I ran to my room and locked it. Somehow he got a key and got into my room. It was really crazy.
Welcome to Ireland Unfiltered. This week's guest is Bret Easton Ellis. That's not him, that's his book, White, which is out now. Bret Easton Ellis is a controversial figure who seems to wind up people whenever he opens his mouth. But we had a long conversation about Donald Trump, about his own father, who was a property developer, about millennials, who he seems to have angered a lot, and he talked about that and his sympathies for them and the position this generation finds itself in. And it was really fascinating talking to one of the great American authors. But before we go to the interview, don't forget to subscribe to Ireland Unfiltered on all the usual channels. Thanks. Bret Easton Ellis,
Yes.
Very welcome to Ireland Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. You've been to Ireland many times over the years.
I have. 1999 was the first time. I came here in 2005. I came here in 2010. It's been about 9 years.
There's a line in your book, White, which we'll just put up there for everyone to see, where you talk about rereading a Lee Siegel essay about Eyes Wide Shut.
Yes.
And you say, by coincidence, I happened to be rereading while listening to various college commencement speeches on YouTube in 2016. And the tenor of all these speeches was about being safe and that kind of thing. And I was reading it, and my immediate reaction was, why do you do that to yourself?
Why was I listening to college commencement speeches while I was working at my desk? Because I was looking for a couple of my friends had done one. Donna Tartt had done one. Jay McInerney had done one. And I was looking for the one that David Foster Wallace had actually famously done.
Yeah.
But then I just got on to 2016, and I noticed the tenor of the speeches were kind of coddling the kids in the college, going, yes, you deserve your safe space. Yes, you must be protected. Yes, you must be coddled. Your bubble is your safe space. Your bubble is your home. Now, they weren't saying exactly that, but that was the message that seemed to be going out there. And I really thought about, well, what about the rebel? What about the person who says, screw it, I'm not following this groupthink. I'm going to be an individual, and I'm going to create the art that I want to create, and I'm not going to live within, as I write, the safety of the parentheses. And I missed that. I wondered what was going on that was why that was the message.
But has college always been full of that kind of slightly overwrought sort of preposterousness and people taking themselves? There's always been a faction where you would take people themselves too seriously.
Kids take themselves too seriously in college all the time, from the beginning of college, whenever college started. But there was a rebellious spirit. There was a belief in the individual, whether you were a writer, whether you were a painter, whether you were a musician, to really go out and explore dangerous territories. Don't be afraid of the taboo. Go to the dark side. And now it seems to be that everyone is kind of coddled into comrade-approved art, is what I call it, where no one's offended. Everyone's sensibility is gingerly handled. And there just doesn't seem to be... I mean, if we live in a generation where millennials right now find Heathers to be an offensive, shocking movie that's in horribly bad taste, and they see Taxi Driver to be a movie that glorifies incels, I don't know. I think we're in a strange moment.
But isn't, like, when you say millennials, and this is the thing we might get into later as well, is just this a generational sweep based on the fact that you can always, like, there's that cartoon about the guy staying up late at his computer saying, I'm come to bed in a minute, dear, someone is being wrong on the internet. Right. You know, and you can always find somebody, right, in this day and age, it's easier than ever to find somebody with an opinion that you disagree with.
Yes, there is.
So there will be something, but not all millennials think that about Taxi Driver.
Of course, and I live with a millennial who
Yeah.
doesn't think that about Taxi Driver at all, but who does lean closer to that than I ever would.
Yeah.
Who does? So it's not. And also, you have to understand where that is coming from. The Heather's review that upset or surprised a lot of people in the States came from The Wrap, which is a pretty good film site that a lot of people go to. And we were really shocked that that was like the main piece of that day. And it was taken seriously, even though many of us thought it was an April Fool's joke. But it is suggestive of not only the writer, but I think plenty of people of his age who would agree with that about Heather's, that it is not acceptable to make fun of school shooting, sexual assault, make homophobic jokes. I mean, I think there's a whole wide range of behavior in Heather's that is now considered unacceptable to a certain, let's call it a certain faction of millennial culture. I have no problem with using millennial as a sweeping term to describe a generation, just like I have no problem with boomers, baby boomers, or Gen X. I do think that all these generations, they're generations for a reason. I mean, they were born into the same moment and they share the same values and the same.
But what is different between this intergenerational chasm and other ones? Because it does seem to be like for thousands of years, people have looked on the generations behind them and thought they're soft or they don't.
Of course.
And what has changed this time?
All the time. I don't know. It's pretty much the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same. But I think the thing that's different with Gen X is that we are a relatively tiny generation compared to the generations that were smashed in between, which is boomers and millennials. They're far larger generations than we are. And I think we're like, as someone wrote, the forgotten middle child of the generations. And we really didn't have that much cultural weight or impact at all compared to boomers. And now, especially compared to what's going to be coming up with millennials. But we did have, and I'm not patting ourselves on the back. I'm on the back, but there seemed to be, I think, a reality about the vagaries of life and its absurdity that I don't know. I write about it in white, and I think it. I think that the lack of coddling, the lack of taking us too seriously, I think aided in us becoming adults in a way that I kind of see it missing the mark with millennials, younger people. And I live with a millennial too. So.
You write in the book, and you've written about this before, about when you your family situation, you grasped that dysfunction in the family at an early age, and you checked out, realizing you were alone.
Yeah.
And you've talked in Lunar Park about your father being careless, abusive, alcoholic, vain, angry, paranoid, and that the world lacked coherence was something you learned from his behavior.
Yes.
Do you think being alone with that has made you feel more aware of the fact that these days people don't have to be alone with these things? They don't have to suffer them like you suffered them.
Well, I think life is about suffering, and I think life is about confronting the dark side of things, because death is coming. I mean, life is full of a lot of hardships. A lot of bad things are going to happen to you down the line. And I think believing that life should only exist for comfort, for a utopian bubble that you've created for yourself, is only going to lead toward a kind of cosmic disillusionment that is going to end up in a paralysis. And you do see it happening. I joke about this generation having security pets and having all of these different kind of maladies and allergies and needing safe space and getting triggered by everything. I do think that is a direct outcome from being over-coddled as kids and into adolescence, that everything is kind of, marked for you to be careful to read or to be careful to watch. Look, it could all work out. It could all work out wonderfully, but it just doesn't seem to be.
But you weren't coddled.
No, and I don't think most of the people that I know who are of my age were.
And
it just wasn't something that the boomer parents wanted to do.
But you had a particular, as you say, your father, it was a particularly scarring relationship you had with him.
Scarring, you know what? Yes, it left scars. I believe a lot of fathers leave scars, and a lot of mothers leave scars on their daughters or their sons. Would I have wished that it was an idyllic, perfect family? I don't know if those exist, but would I have wished that everything went great and my father was an awesome dad? Sometimes I do. Or that I wasn't gay, or that he wasn't an alcoholic or whatever. I also know that I would never become a writer. Never become a writer if everything had gone perfect, because pain was something that motivated me to become a writer, to express myself. So, you kind of like have to balance it out, the good and the bad. There are days where I wish my dad was a better father, because I think I would have been able to, and still to a degree, move through the world without being so suspicious of men and their motivations. That's a thing that I've tried to get rid of a lot, and I've worked on for many, many years. And on other days, I think, God, I wouldn't have written 5 novels if my father had been, the perfect dad.
But that's something then you can looking back, you can kind of attach a meaning to it, that this is what has happened because of the way I was brought up. But it doesn't change the loneliness and the aloneness you had at that time.
No, but I have to say the loneliness of the artist or the loneliness of the writer, I would call more of an enforced solitary. I never felt lonely.
No?
I was a solitary child.
Yeah.
I was a solitary adolescent. I'm still a solitary adult, and I prefer it that way. And you need that solitary to that sense of solitary to create. So never lonely. An outsider, certainly.
Yeah.
But those were the cards that were dealt, and I played them.
And is that something that, because today it's much easier to belong? It's easier to have a group. That is a thing that has changed?
That's the fantasy, yeah. That it is easier to have a group and belong. That we're all interconnected on some level. I don't know. Are we? Is everybody interconnected? Is everybody happily interconnected?
Well, this is what you talk about in the book, the cult of likability, this sort of idea that I think in the book journeys from almost kind of when you're writing about actors and, Judd Nelson, say, appearing on your podcast and not wanting to shed the likability.
Right.
And then that seems to now you feel as transmitted to society at whole. Everyone has become a kind of an actor wanting to portray a version of themselves.
I think that's true. And I think that social media encourages it, definitely. That's where it started. You're displaying yourself on social media. You're exhibiting yourself. So there is a performative aspect to it. How far do some people take it? How real is it for some people? I don't know. It seems to be pretty fake for many who want to present an idealized version of their lives. And I know plenty of people. It was kind of a joke. I was with my boyfriend. He was talking about his sister was so depressed. And he was on the phone with her. And then suddenly, 10 minutes later, there was an Instagram she put up of her holding her 2 kids going, having a wonderful morning. And it was sort of this moment where, okay, yeah. And I've talked to other friends who, you want to put this idealized version of your life out there, whether it's, and of course Instagram and those places encourage it. I mean, it really isn't the death of the world, but it is something that makes me think often a lot about authenticity. And where is that going?
But you say, you mentioned, or you refer to Patrick Bateman in American Psycho saying, I want to fit in. And you're saying in 1987, that was also true for me.
For me, yes.
So if you had the technological tools that we have today, maybe you would have been looking for people to comfort you or like what you're saying in 1987.
I think I was going to say, I think I tried to do that on Twitter, but I didn't try to do that on Twitter. I tried to do the opposite on Twitter. But I don't know. I never felt the need to be, the fitting in wasn't about wanting to be liked. The fitting in was I wanted to be comfortable with myself in that society. Fitting in wasn't necessarily about having everyone like me. I wanted to be comfortable in my own skin, and I wanted to be comfortable in this society I was coming of age in that I just thought was total BS. I just thought it was not real. It valued all the wrong things, and I became, like most young men, somewhat disillusioned by the realities of life. And it's a classic story. It's the universal story. And I did. And when I was writing American Psycho, and I did write that scene where Patrick Bateman says he wants to fit in, that was me.
Yeah.
I was writing that. It's an extreme version of me. But one of the reasons why Patrick Bateman is in White so often, and I reference him, is because he haunts me. And he is a character that will forever be identified with me, more so than anything else I've ever written. And so when I was putting White together, I found myself going through some of the podcasts that I record, and where a lot of White comes from, these podcasts, and being drawn to going into how Patrick Bateman was created, what he means to me, where he would be now, and going into the sort of surreal experience of dealing with the American Psycho Broadway musical.
And why does he haunt you?
Because he was a character that I could never, as much as it was based on me, and as long as the novel was, and it took me 3 years to write it, I could never put a face to Patrick Bateman. I could never visualize him. He seemed to be almost this ghost, this voice for disillusioned yuppiedom. And I also thought that the novel itself was somewhat experimental, and that it was going to sell 4,000 copies or whatever, and then I'd go on to a book that would really connect with a mass audience, which was Glamorama, which did not at all connect with the mass audience. And so it was the irony of the book becoming what it is now still haunts me, because I never thought that American Psycho would be the book that connects.
And do you have a nostalgia for that time? Because there's a line in White where you say, I now know that I was never happier than I was in the summer of 91.
In the summer of 1991, I had just gone through a trial by fire of the cancellation of American Psycho by my publishing house, death threats over this horrible book that no one had read yet, but the media was obsessed with it and wanted to cancel me, wanted to cancel the book. The National Organization of Women were going around, were boycotting not only me, but everything that my publisher was publishing that spring. And it seemed like the world was completely against me. Not like now at all. I mean, White is extremely controversial, and I'm getting a lot of hate for it. But compared to 1990, 1991, this is nothing. I mean, Twitter is nothing compared to a few monolithic corporations who are trying to crush a book, and there's nowhere else to go. And so finally, the book is published in the spring of 91, and nothing happens. All controversy goes away, more or less. Just another boring book. It's not 400 pages of dismemberment and mutilation, and I don't know. I felt a huge sense of relief, and I remember that summer just feeling so free. I spent many years working on the book, and then this controversy I dealt with all through 1990. Then it was over. So that's what I meant when I was the happiest in the summer of 1991.
And you look back on that as a time, do you think you will be, do you think about happiness? Do you think about your own happiness much? Do you think it matters?
I think I'm actually much happier now at this point in my life on a continuing basis, just because you just get older and you kind of get it more, you're used to it, and you're not worried about things. You don't feel you have to hold the pose.
Yeah,
there's no pose anymore.
Yeah,
you're posing a lot before, and you're posing because you want to be attractive and you want to meet people and you want to have sex and all this stuff. And then at a certain point, you just go, I just got to be myself.
Yeah, so you say that about the midlife crisis. I think when you're talking about other people in the book, you say that they don't have to maintain the pose any longer.
Have to maintain the pose, and that is freedom. That is freedom.
And would you say, because I've heard on your podcast you've referenced the Orson Welles line, if you want a happy ending, that of course depends on when you stop the story.
That's true.
Well,
we could have stopped the story in 1991. I was on a beach in Wainscott, and I was with my first serious partner, and it was a wonderful summer.
The Patrick Bateman, and there's another reason for like maybe his relevance now, because it foreshadowed so much, because Donald Trump is a character in American Psycho.
So prescient.
And you knew him, and you say you liked him. Does that affect how you viewed the reaction to Trump since he got elected?
Completely. I had problems with Trump in 87, 86, 87, 88, 89 when I was working on American Psycho, and he was kind of ubiquitous in New York. He was all over the place. He was always on the cover of the New York Post, and I'm sure planting many articles about himself under his who was that PR guy, John whatever, calling up the New York Post like, well, I was at so and so pizzeria last night. He bothered me because I couldn't understand why all of these Wall Street guys aspire to be him. He seemed kind of like a slightly oafish, slightly clumsy, more nouveau riche creature than what I thought the guys I knew on Wall Street really wanted to be. And yet Trump was their idol. And that was strange. And also, Trump is a bit of a buffoon. And there was something a disconnect between these cool young guys on Wall Street looking up to Donald Trump. And I found it funny to make Donald Trump this kind of father figure to Patrick Bateman. And Bateman's obsessed with Trump, and he always wants to know what restaurants he goes to, and if Ivana's okay, and how are the kids, and where can I, how can I meet him, and can I get on his yacht? And Bateman's walking up to 57th and 5th Avenue and stares up at the Trump Tower a couple of times in the novel, drawn to it in a kind of daze. I thought it was all funny.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, and I thought it was kind of a criticism of the men in that moment, and that they were looking up to Trump, because look, Roy Cohn as your mentor, these crappy racist things his father was doing with the apartment buildings they owned. There was something about Trump that was, I found then, unpleasant, and I think what happened is I got it out of my system then. And by the time everything else now rolled around, I just found him absurd. And
you say he's a father figure to Patrick Bateman. Your father was a property developer.
It was.
Too. Did you see anything of him in Trump, or Trump in him?
My father was a much cooler customer.
Was he?
And probably would have not embraced the Trump aesthetic. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I wonder often if my father, who's long deceased, I wonder if my father would have voted for him. I don't know. But he would not have been able to connect with Trump, the needy vulgarian bully. My father was a bit of a bully. I don't know if he was a vulgarian, but, my dad is older than Trump, so I don't know. I don't know if they're men of the same demo. I don't know.
But did it affect did you find it hard was it one of the reasons why you couldn't get with the kind of outrage about Trump when he rose then through the primaries in 2016 and this hostility to him, because you saw him as this kind of buffoonish figure?
Well, there was no outrage during the primaries. Everyone loved what he was doing. He was decimating all this political BS. It was delightful watching those debates and seeing him get rid of all of those fake guys, Jeb Bush and Mario and all of these people like fumbling around. It was really like political theater that even my boyfriend, who was a socialist Democrat or Democrat socialist, was found extremely satisfying. It's just that then there was no one left and it was Trump.
Yeah.
The fun was over for a lot of people. But that was a kind of amazing political theater what Trump was doing during those debates, just calling everybody out, and a large part of the audience loving it.
But the results, even at that stage, he was doing things like he was mocking the disabled. He was doing things like that.
That is a very controversial thing, because there's big supporters don't believe that.
They don't believe it.
They don't believe that. They believe that is how he mocks everybody and is not this word. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I am just telling you that there is definitely a side of on this divide that would go, you're repeating something that's not true.
Yeah, but like you see, I get the thing that Trump is. There's a humor there, and I watched a lot of those debates and the way he would take Jeb Bush down and say, maybe you should have your mother up here and little, all the guys.
Yes,
and what he is, there is something funny about him. There's no question about that. But it is whether you think it's. Like, if it wasn't for the buttons he's pushing, especially the nationalistic buttons,
yes.
I think he's pushing,
which everyone is pushing. It's all over the place.
Yeah,
it's just not what happened in the Ukraine this last weekend. Who was elected?
Yeah,
a comedian was elected.
Yeah.
It's happening everywhere. It's really sweeping. So it is America, but it is everywhere. Something's happening on a global. It's just not Trump. It is an unrest.
Yeah, So it is a thing to be concerned, because, like, when I read White, and I laughed at some of the depictions of the outrage among the liberal left at Trump, and Madonna wanting to blow up the White House, and Barbara Streisand putting on weight because of Trump. All these things that are ludicrous, but it wouldn't shift me from my position that Trump is a dangerous person at the same time. But you seem to have reacted an awful lot to what you're encountering in the world around you, and maybe it's put you in a more in a position where you're less inclined to be unsympathetic to Trump.
Sympathetic or unsympathetic? I don't think I'm sympathetic. Am I? Look, he doesn't weigh that much in my mind. And what I'm writing about in White is the coverage of Trump. It's not about Trump, and that is what I was interested in. I'm not interested in his policies. A lot of his policies I don't like. I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not here to defend him at all. I was interested in how people react to him and how he's being covered. And that is, and of course, everything you said is my boyfriend agrees with, and as many of my friends agree with. I do, however, live, oddly enough, in a world where I have a lot of friends who are Trump supporters. Yeah. And I have a lot of friends who are not, definitely not. In fact, I was in New York having dinner with 4 friends who are loathe Trump, all college friends. So, but I do have a mix. And, maybe that's what gives me this distance in a way where I can say, okay, I hear you, Todd. I live with you 24/7. I'm in your shoes. So you're telling me all the things I'm listening to. And then I also have friends who like him, who are just as intelligent, and they're into him, and they tell me why. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm hearing you too. What can I say? It's not like it's across the board negative for Trump. There's a side that hates him, and there's a side that likes him. I don't know what these last 3 years, what the resistance managed to do. I have a terrible feeling that he will be reelected in 2020. I think there was a lot of time wasted. I think they're catching up right now by saying, let's just forget Trump. Let's connect with policy. Let's find the best candidate to get rid of him. It might be too late. I don't know. There was an awful lot of time in terms of impeachment and screaming about Trump and getting Trump and the Mueller report and Stormy Daniels, whatever. All of these things that Trump somehow survived like a cockroach. He's survived everything since 2015. I cannot imagine a politician has ever had that much stuff thrown at him and survived. Not only survived, but kind of thrived. And that might be enraging to some people, but I don't know. It's the resistance and the anger about Trump led us down a strange path, I think.
Has it frustrated you that you've had to sort of talk about him and put in a position where you sound like a defender of Trump?
Yes, of course it does. And I talk about this in the book. And but I also, but that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm not here posing, and I'm not here like, pretending to be someone I'm not. I mean, this is what I was interested in, and this is what I'm talking about. And if people want to see it that way, and believe me, they do want to see that way because of the hysteria among the reviews for White in the U.S., so be it. I can only be myself, and I don't think I think that's the only way it works. And if some people want to brand me as a Trump supporter, which if you talk to my boyfriend, you would know that is not the case in our household. But even if you say anything, the mood is so hysterical that is what happens. And I there were pieces called "What the fuck is wrong with Bret Easton Ellis" in the Daily Beast. What the fuck is wrong with Bret Easton Ellis? And there was this very hostile, crazy New Yorker interview that I did that just seemed to be examples of Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C of what I talk about in White. This overreactive, hysterical media that is, I don't know.
How did you feel during that New Yorker interview? Because it did seem to go in a way that you didn't enjoy.
I felt, I would encourage anyone who really wants to feel stressed out to put themselves in that interview. I knew 2 minutes in, okay, I can hang up. I can pretend that I've lost reception. But I actually thought, okay, he wants to do this. I somehow thought I could win it. I somehow thought I could win it. And then I realized I couldn't. And then I got defensive. And then I moved into like 7 stages of trying to deal with an interview. I got contrite, and then I got absurdist, and then I got apologetic. And there's a couple things. First of all, I just don't have the policy knowledge to do that kind of interview, which is what it showed me up as. But you know what? Again, it was an exhibit of what I complain about in White. But I do wish that there had been an actual interview, that we could have really sat down and talked about what his issues were instead of doing it as a kind of performative art prank on a writer and on the book. I think it would have been. Look, it wouldn't have been as clickbaity, and it would not have gotten me trending, and it would not have therefore put the book to number 1 on 5 different categories in Amazon that afternoon when it was languishing in the 20s. So I don't know, but it was it's just where we are right now.
But is there you talk about it wouldn't have been a clickbaity, but is there a financial benefit to being as hostile towards millennials as you're being as being as hostile to the modern world?
I don't want to be hostile to millennials. I live with one. I don't want to be.
I know.
I'm sympathetic to them.
Yeah, you say that in the book. You're sympathetic to the New Yorkies.
I am. Yeah, I do.
And the world they like.
They came into. They're not in a good place. I don't think. I mean, I'm sympathetic to them.
But how has that not come across then?
I don't know, because people like this idea of me as an anti-millennial. Well, this idea of me as like anti-everything, as some sort of like dark, controversial figure, and I did do these Generation Wuss tweets 4, 5, 6 years ago that I thought were really funny, and my boyfriend thought were funny too, and I think that rubs millennials the wrong way. And also, millennials are very insensitive, very entitled, and they don't like to be criticized that way, even made fun of, even joked about, and maybe that's part of it. But I'm gonna have to clarify the millennial thing. Certainly, on Sunday, I think in New York, I'm doing a Times talk where, for 30 seconds, I talked about millennials, but boom, it's the headline of the piece, and an army of millennials, something like, millennials don't read anymore. Yeah. Millennials aren't. That's 20 seconds in a 2-hour conversation I had with Decca, whoever who wrote it. And then, of course, an army of millennials start coming after me on Twitter. But, of course, none of them read the article because it's behind a paywall. So they don't really know what the rest of it is, and they're all flailing into space. But they Exhibit D.
I would, it's been pointed out to me by someone in our office when you were coming in that they do read more.
They do read.
They read more than
Gen Xers. Yes, they do. Yeah.
So
it's kind of what they read, but it's not what, I mean, if you look at the top 10 books, and there are a lot of young adult and whatever. And also you have to understand a lot of millennials are still in school. So you have those 4 years of people still reading and doing so whatever. Look, they do read. Apologies to millennials who are offended by that. I don't know a lot of millennials who read personally, but if this is true, I apologize.
But isn't that more to do with the culture as well, that you think that people aren't reading, like the novel is...
Well, the novel is... Look, books are selling. Books are selling. Certainly in the U.S., 2 good first novels I read, The Girls by Emma Cline and They're There by Tommy Orange, have sold a lot of copies hardcover. There's just not a discussion about them in terms in the mainstream.
Yeah.
And I miss those conversations with friends. I have a lot of friends, well, maybe they are those Gen Xers who aren't reading the current novels, but the novel itself doesn't seem to be at the center stage of our conversation and culture. That is just a fact, okay? And we can lament it, or we can get upset about it, or we can be okay with it. But it's just the phone has replaced it. The phone has simply replaced the novel, because I remember I was reading, of all things, Richard Burton, his diaries from the 1960s, 70s, when he was not completely wrecked by drink yet. And he was a voracious reader. Voracious reader. And actually quite a good writer. And he would describe in every entry the 3 books that he's going to read, and a book a night sometimes, and he would make a list of the books he was going to take on vacation. He would talk about the book Liz is holding and the book he's holding while they're on their yacht, always mentioning the books. And I realized while I was reading this, because it sounded like my childhood, it sounded like what my family would do on vacation, that was our phone. That the book.
And did you conclude yourself in that now? Do you go to your phone before you go to a book?
In the morning, I pick up my phone first. I check what time it is, and I see if anyone's emailed me. But I do put it down, and then I do pick up a book, and I'm not virtue signaling myself. No, it's not. But I do read fiction for about an hour and a half.
Because I think an awful lot of these things actually come down to the fact that technology, what has taken place, and what maybe shifts this intergenerational thing to somewhere different than previous ones, is that we've had a technological revolution. And that the technology that this generation are dealing with has transformed everything.
Of course,
and
absolutely.
And you said, I think you said in one of your podcasts, you said that your boyfriend plays a lot of video games, and for you, the novel was that virtual reality.
Of course, it was.
And now people lose themselves in video games. They lose themselves in all these things,
and understandably too.
Yeah. So that's the thing that has changed, rather than anything really having changed among people or generations. We're dealing with a technology that we've never seen before.
We are. But the novel has survived a long time. And obviously it still is surviving. There are plenty of books out there. And people are reading them. It's just that when I'm in a car, I am old enough to know that when I hear 2 millennials discussing a video game as if it was a movie or a current novel, I'm old. It makes me realize something that I don't know. I mean, do I really think that Anna Karenina or Ulysses or Sentimental Education is worse than Final Fantasy 15? I don't know.
But I remember Kingsley Amis saying that why he shouldn't have to sit down and read Jude the Obscure just because they didn't have television then, because like the technology has changed, and he would rather watch television than sit down and read Jude the Obscure, for example.
You wouldn't want to read Jude the Obscure? That's one of my favorite Hardy novels. Are you kidding?
Well, that's what
I would love to read Jude the Obscure. Oh my God, that shocking ending. It's really good.
Yeah, but that's what,
I guess I know what he's saying, but that sounds as reactionary as I guess I sound to some people.
But also that was said probably 30 years ago now. So like we
all end up old men. We all end up curmudgeonly old men.
Do you think
complaining about the generation supplanting us?
Is there a nostalgia in it? Do you think you feel nostalgic for that time? And you say it was an innocent time, even though we decidedly felt it wasn't as we lived through it. And I think nostalgia is always we're all nostalgic for anything we've survived.
I am happier now than I was then. Nostalgic, I don't know. There was a lot of problems. I mean, there was a lot of things that distracted me. I was gay. That was very distracting and kind of something I thought a lot about. I had a family situation that was stressful because of my father. And I was working through this process of becoming an artist and writing a lot and figuring out what my voice was. And that was kind of stressful too. and I was reprocessing the world all the time because it really wasn't conforming to me as someone who was gay, for example. Like I had to reprocess every pop song and music song to kind of like get the emotional heart of it. So it was all, stressful. My 20s were stressful, became well known at 21, wasn't looking to become famous, and it happens. And so all of that was stressful to one degree or another. And I'm not particularly nostalgic about certain periods of my life.
No, but are you like when
1991, perhaps the summer of '91?
Yeah.
But now, no. I mean, you just kind of get it at a later age, and you just don't worry so much. I worried a lot. I worried about a lot of things, and I worried, will this person love me? Am I ever going to be able to get back together with my dad? I don't know. Just so many things with fights with friends, and then career pressures, and I didn't want to have any career pressures. Where's the book? I don't know. Not to say that I was unhappy, but much less stressed now.
But are you nostalgic for what you see as a time when certain culture was more valued than it is now?
It's a waste of time. It's a bit of a waste of time to do that. You really can't do that. And I see how Todd has completely, I mean, look, he complains about his generation a lot. He is not the happiest camper, and he sees a lot of flaws in his generation, which is a very healthy thing to do. But he was reading White, and which is not necessarily a book for millennials, I don't think, but he couldn't grasp the analog era that I describe, the way of buying shoes or going to a bookstore or waiting in line for a movie where you can't buy your ticket and get your seat. And he said, I cannot believe you lived life like that. That's like living in a third world country. How did you survive? I said, well, quite well. I mean, it was fine. It was nice. It was the analog era was great. It was part of the empire. It was awesome. And I do feel my sympathy for Todd and my sympathy for millennials really comes from what technology has wrought. It's information overload, and everything seems disposable. And I remember, when I wanted to find out about a band, or I wanted to see a movie. I went to a record store. I was curious about records that were made before I was born. Early Bob Dylan, early Rolling Stone, when I became of age and I was more interested in music. Go to a record store, I would search them out, I would sit down and I would play the record, concentrating on it and not doing anything else, looking at it. The same way with a novel. I would mostly read half of it when I first got it, go to a bookstore, look at it. And I do think that there was something about that connection with either a movie, where you drove to a movie theater, you didn't stream it on your phone and while you're watching it with your earbuds in a Starbucks, but you actually were in a massive theater. And you'd made you took the time to drive to the theater, to sit in the theater. The movie was going to start on its own time, not yours. And you kind of gave yourself over to the experience. I don't see that really happening except for, I guess, with video games in terms of... But even that is a kind of... I don't know. Anyway... That's what I talk about in the book, and if I am nostalgic for that, I guess perhaps I am. But I also work like that still. I still listen to records, and I still read hardcover books, and I still drive to the movies, and I find my seat in the theater. So I was trained.
Yeah, it's very hard to know what to kind of dismiss as nostalgia and what just to dismiss, or what to kind of hold on to as something that was, a better way or a better time or
better,
whatever.
right? Better. Well,
so
that's the word.
But it is hard because nostalgia in the political sphere has become a kind of a very prevalent thing. If you look at it, Make America Great Again, there's a nostalgic element to that.
Right.
In Brexit in the UK,
of course,
is a huge nostalgia thing. Even in Ireland, like ridiculously, there are people who will tell you that Ireland was a better place in the 1950s. Like, Ireland has no golden age to go back to, but somehow you will get extreme nationalistic, racist people who will kind of say it was better before it became more multicultural. Now, Ireland needs as many injections of cultural ideas as it can get, in my view. but even those people will try and create some sort of golden age. And it's important to kind of recognize that there isn't really a golden age at the same time.
But I know a lot of millennials who feel that the age that I grew up in was a golden age economically. And that I always hear that from young people. Oh, well, not that Gen X screwed anything up, but boomers screwed it up. And that financially, the one thing that they are dreaming or fantasizing about was that we did have it better financially than they did. And that's a big thing. And so there is a kind of nostalgia, dare I say, among Todd and his group about how it must have been so much better then when jobs were easy and student debt wasn't
And
where it
the
was, and the
afford a
economy.
home. Yeah,
you could afford to rent an apartment with maybe one roommate, not four.
Yeah.
And it was so that I hear a lot, that lament.
But do you like when you talk about struggling when you were gay and struggling with that when you were younger? Like, do you think it's a better world now to come out in?
Completely, 100%. It's much better.
But then you talk about, I think it's Jason Collins coming out and being treated like a kind of the gay man as magical elf, I think.
Well, Jason Collins could deal with that in any way he like. That is, again, the media sentimentalization of gay men that still seems prevalent. It still seemed prevalent at the 2018 Olympics.
But is it not like maybe it's not the ultimate place you want to land in, but is it still not better than the world you experienced?
Of course. Better, less interesting, but better perhaps. I do miss the idea of the gay rebel, of the person who's going to have to push against or create art that expresses a group that it has been marginalized to a degree, and there was a lot of interesting art that came out of it, whether it was Edward Albee or whether it was Tennessee Williams or Robert Mapplethorpe or Gore Vidal or Truman Capote or George Cukor or any number of Hollywood directors. I don't know. The notion that so much of it is also politicized and has an ideology and there's not an aesthetic to it. Yeah, I mean, again, you balance it out. Great, equality for gays is awesome. I wish in so many ways that I had. I didn't have that. Well, I didn't have that much stress, but kind of that little that distraction of being gay, and the fact that that's been eliminated can only be looked at as a positive thing.
Ireland has a gay Taoiseach now, gay prime minister.
Awesome.
And we had Rory O'Neill in here last week, and he was saying that sometimes Varadkar, the prime minister, gets criticised by the gay community for not being a good enough gay.
Pete Buttigieg in the U.S., this is what's happening now in the media, that Pete Buttigieg is not gay enough, or by the gay press. The gay press. Well, there aren't a lot of gays, and I can attest to that. There aren't a lot of gays, and they get a lot of criticism from other gays, and that's just how it has been played out. I wish people would choose their targets a little bit better. I don't think Pete Buttigieg really needs to be attacked by the gay community as being a really quite positive representation of what it means to be a gay man in 2019. And I might not agree with him politically, and I might not going to vote for him, but I do like that he exists and that he's portraying himself in this way. This is actually quite rare. We haven't had a politician like this with this kind of, to a degree, popularity showing up on the scene, and I see it all the time. I see on gay sites, criticisms of Pete and his husband, and they're so bland, and is this who we really want, and is this gay representation at its finest? And it's like, we're in the circular firing squad that Obama talked about. You aim one target, and then you get to another one, and Obama was talking about this because of the Joe Biden thing that happened a couple weeks ago, and he said, people, choose your targets better. Go for the real problem. But once you start shooting at everything that's somewhat connected to it, you destroy yourself. So I don't know, but I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of gay coverage of a gay politician.
And again, but is that something that penetrates into the mainstream because you can find it wherever you look for it, but maybe it isn't. Like, it's just, again, that democratization of opinions. You can find something anywhere when you look for it now.
That's true. You can, and you can also ignore stuff if it comes along.
That's harder, though, is it?
Well, it's harder because so much of it seems to be clickbait. So much of it seems to be screaming for attention, and it's like everything seems to be like that now on Twitter. Every tweet seems to be that way. I don't know. I think you have to train yourself to, go with your instinct and know when to skip it, or if you're going to read it, understand where it's coming from.
Do you think the concept of free speech has changed because of technology? Because you say opinions aren't crimes and they can change, which everyone would accept. But there is opinions can be amplified so much now, and you can again hear so much hurtful, aggressive opinions that maybe it has changed the whole concept of freedom of speech.
Right. Aggressive opinions.
Aggressive towards minorities, towards groups.
Yeah. Towards everybody, but yeah, that too. What do we do about it? How do we handle it? It becomes very tricky, this notion of protecting people from speech, and especially in free speech societies. If you're going to have the West Baptist Church, that horrible organization that, goes to funerals and has faggot written out on big cardboard placards, I don't know. Once you start closing the door, and this is the problem, and many Facebook and Twitter, where does it stop? That's the concern. Okay, so you cut this down, and I do see this happening. Then that is what's next. Then that is what's next. And then what are you left with? I don't know. I mean, in a free speech society, do we have to deal with the trolls in order to have a truly free speech society? Or do we have a list of rules that we have to? I mean, what is one person's list of rules about something is another person's freedom of speech? Yeah. I don't know. Who decides?
And who do you trust with that decision?
Who would you trust with that decision? Also, people can take responsibility for themselves. If you are feeling that you're being tormented on social media, and I'm not comparing myself to minorities at all in terms of how they can be tormented on, I get off. I walk away from it. I mean, I take control of the situation and I walk away from it. I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been criticized for so long that I'm used to a trolling and I'm used to people saying bad things about me. But I just don't know opening that door and selectively choosing things that a faction thinks is offensive. I don't know.
But even broader in that, like you look at something like Brexit being a very good example in terms of the campaign and news stories that appeared in people's tweet feeds, right, which turned out to be not true, and all this sense of stuff being spread that isn't actually correct and is tapping into people's fears. Yeah. And yet, if you believe in absolute freedom of speech,
that should be fine.
It should be fine, but there's something. But the technology has outpaced some of the concepts we hold dear.
It has, hasn't it? What do we do? Those concepts that we hold so dear, well, they're being what? They're being screwed with. Yeah. They're being messed with. What do we do about that? That's part of our situation right now. But I don't know if, I think we agree. I don't know what the law should be and who should be making the law.
You say that you're never really good at realizing what might offend someone.
Yeah, pretty much.
I find that hard to believe.
People find that so hard to believe. I don't know. I find it hard to believe that when I said, are millennials reading anymore? I don't think millennials are reading anymore. Do would you think that would cause thousands and thousands of outraged Twitter people to be offended by what I said?
No, I must say, the New Yorker one, I felt slightly different. But when I saw the Sunday Times one last week, and I knew you were coming on, and I thought I must check in and see what crime you've committed now. And then I read it. I was like, is that it? Like, that one didn't seem like a massive...
I get a lot of those.
Yeah.
I get a lot of those. I don't know. I don't think you can make a career out of it. I just never saw, like, working on a book for 3 years, or with Glamorama 8 years, or Lunar Park 7 years, that is the kind of career to base being a provocateur on. I haven't published anything in 9 years. I have not gone out there in 9 years to offend anybody or to do something that's not in my blood. And I never thought anything in this book, I swear to God, was controversial. Not to me. It's not controversial to me. And then the book comes out and it's super controversial in the U.S. And what do you do about it? I just play along. I mean, I just have to play along with it. But I do not see myself as an instigator or a provocateur. People have called me that throughout my career, but I just write what I want to write. And if it shocks some people, what can I do about it?
Why is it taking you so long to write your next book?
How long? For novels? I don't know. I mean, I get obsessed with them, and before I know it, a year or two has passed, and I've been still working on an outline. I'm never going to work that way again. I have an idea for a novel that I want to start soon, and I want to write it extremely quickly, in a matter of months, and then either I'll figure out a way how to do it, either as an Audible book or as something you can, buy online. I don't know. But there was a time in my life where I spent about 9 years writing and promoting a novel called Glamorama. And it was a great decade. I loved living with that book all that time. It was super important to me. And I loved the craft building of it all. And, it came out and did what it did, which was not as much as we all hoped. But I will never take that experience back. That was a great time. And I think I like writing. I liked writing so much that I wanted to prolong the pleasure of it, I guess. And then it just comes a time where the book's done and you're moving on.
And do you enjoy writing this book as much?
I did. This book is actually, in a weird way, a compilation of stuff from my podcast, essays from my podcast. But they've been rewritten and they've been cleaned up a bit. And certainly they were restructured. Part of one podcast might be here and another part in another chapter. And it ended up being a literary endeavor, which I thought it was going to be a collection. And then I realized this is not a collection of my podcast rants. This is more of an essay in 8 parts. And so it was a literary endeavor. It was creative. It was creative to do. It wasn't just, putting a compilation together. And I really enjoyed it. And I think that's what sparked off the idea to get back to fiction and to writing something, again, that's not so labored, that doesn't take so long, and that's kind of fast and fun genre. And I've been thinking about that a lot.
And doesn't make people angry? Or will it make people angry?
Well, I have an idea for a torture scene in this book
Right.
that is probably going to upset some people, but I don't know. What can I say?
And we'll let you go, but tell me, I don't know if you want to tell me about the first time you came to Dublin, you got into an argument with Irvine Welsh.
I did. We were just drunk.
Right.
We were smashed. We were at the restaurant at what was the hotel?
Clarence.
The Clarence. We were at the restaurant at the Clarence. We were actually there. How 1999 is this? For a British GQ shoot. So this was really at the end of the Britpop lad moment in England at the time. Irvine Welsh and Bret Easton Ellis. And it was supposed to be like a layout, like we're hanging out at dinner with our editors. It's so I went with it. We were both wearing suits and trying to look cool and whatever. And Irvine just got way too wasted, and like put me in a what do you call it when you put your
headlock?
A headlock. Put me in a headlock. It was dragging me down the hall, and then I kept like stomping on his feet to have him let go. Finally, he let go, panting, and fell against the wall and slid on the floor. And I ran to my room and locked it. Somehow he got a key and got into my room. It was really crazy. And we were looking for drugs, and we couldn't find drugs. And I was in the middle of a book tour, and I had to get up the next day. I have to tell you, I see Irvin now in L.A. You know, we're both old men. We never eat before 7 o'clock. He said, okay, so where do you want to go? And I said, well, I don't. What time do you want to eat? Well, 6:30, I think. I'd like to be in bed by 9:30. And then we go to a restaurant. And it's like, I can't have more than 2 martinis. It's going to like make me a little. And I said, I agree. Wine? Maybe we'll split a carafe. And then we both float out into the LA air and head to our respective abodes. Very different 2019 from 1999.
Well, enjoy Dublin as long as you don't get into any more trouble.
Don't think so on this tour.
Bret Easton Ellis, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Really enjoyed that. Bret Easton Ellis, funny, lovely man who I think kind of brought a lot more nuance to that interview than you actually see when sometimes you read his stuff in print or and see it in black and white. But before we go, please, again, subscribe if you like the show. Subscribe and review across all the usual channels. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.